Good evening and welcome to Gibson's Bookstore Remote. I am Elizabeth, the events coordinator for Gibson's Bookstore, and we are joined tonight by Brodi Ashton, Cynthia Hand, and Jodi Meadows. These are the authors of My Calamity Jane, which Gibson's Bookstore events program is sustained by book sales, so the book is available from Gibson's, as are My Plain Jane and My Lady Jane. They sent us a very generous amount of book plates. Signed book plates, signed by the three of them, which we are including with all purchases. And we are also joined tonight by Brodi's parrot, whose name we will learn in just a moment, and Jodi's kitties are also there. I believe I saw Cynthia's dog, so we might have some animal cameos joining us this evening. But tonight, I suppose we shall just get started. Who wants to start talking about My Calamity Jane? The parrot, actually. The parrot, we probably...
Well, first I'll tell you the parrot's name. It's Pigeon Scout McWidgerton III. Because I'm a huge dork.
And you call her mostly...
Pidgey. Or Scout.
Yeah, the rest is kind of a mouthful.
Yeah. I'm not like, Pigeon Scout McWidgerton III, get over here.
Only when she misbehaves.
Yeah, but she won't be. I'll put her back in her cage soon.
Monster.
So, My Calamity Jane. Well, who wants to start talking about My Calamity Jane?
Cynthia does.
Sure, I will. So we actually started writing My Calamity Jane right after we wrote My Lady Jane. It was actually the second book that we wrote. And then just because of the way that our publisher wanted to roll out the books, they suggested we do something in between. And we ended up having to change the story of this book a few times, and we're super proud of it. But we basically, the short pitch for it is that it's the Wild West meets Teen Wolf. So it's a Wild West in which our three main characters, Calamity Jane, Annie Oakley, and Frank Butler, are performing in this show called Wild Bill's Wild West. Why did we like Wild Bill's Wild West? To torment our audiobook narrator. Hi,
yes.
Sophie. This is why we did it. Say, Grand Capshaw! No, but... so that's how we started, and yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. It was actually harder to write than, because we knew a little bit less about our own Western history than we knew about English history. So it was really fun but challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah, we rewrote the book 4 times. We had 4 different versions of the book, so it lived up to its title, Calamity. It was quite the calamity. It was
yeah.
Well, which version did you end up going with?
4.
The 4th one.
The 4th one, yeah. The one they decided to print eventually.
The first one involves zombies,
which we've just heard how much Elizabeth loves zombies. Yes. And then we rewrote it a few times after that.
We were dumb enough to make the zombies sentient.
We had a guy named Dead Mike. He was great.
He was my favorite character. I still grieve for Dead Mike.
I miss Dead Mike. He was fun.
So we actually have a question pop up. How did you decide to go with Jane's and not other names? And she says she thinks that you might be doing a Mary series.
We kind of wrote ourselves into a corner with the Jane thing, because we started with My Lady Jane. We weren't sure it was ever going to be a series of books, and so then we called ourselves the Lady Janies, and then we were in that corner with the Janes. We had to find a Jane to rescue.
I think our publisher really ended up liking it too, because, and assuming that we just wanted to write about Janes forever, because we came to them with Calamity Jane next. And then when they wanted to have another book before Calamity Jane, they were like, so what other Jane would you write about? We were like, oh, you really want Jane and just Jane.
Thankfully, there are like thousands and millions of Janes. So.
So I assume this is probably one of the most frequent questions you get asked at author events, but what is the process like writing with 3 authors?
It's really fun. It kind of has ruined us for working on our solo books in some ways.
Writing a book by yourself is so much harder.
We do it in person generally. This year might be a little different, but generally we meet up at a place that's close to one of our homes. So we kind of rotate who has to travel the farthest. And Lady Jane, we wrote at Brodi's family's condo in Midway, Utah, and we did a lot of retreats up there. And we've written in Virginia and in Idaho, and we just come up with the plot in the weeks and months before, come up with an outline, and then when we get there for the week or so that we have, then we all get up in the morning, have breakfast, and then sit down at the table and write one chapter a day. So we each are responsible for a certain point of view. So in My Lady Jane, I saw this question earlier. In My Lady Jane, I wrote Edward, Jodi wrote Jane, Brodi wrote G, and we just sit down and write chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, all together, sitting at the table, talking about it as we go. We work on it all day, and we get our chapter done. There's a lot of peer pressure because nobody wants to be the one who doesn't get their chapter done that day.
There's a lot of coffee.
A lot.
And laughing. And then we have dinner, and after dinner we read our chapters out loud and laugh some more and make some suggestions to each other and plan how that day's writing is going to affect the next day's work, and so on and so on. So after a week, we have about half a book, and then we take a break for a while and then come back and write the second half in another week. So
Jodi, do you have a cat?
That's how it goes.
Yeah, she just reached up behind me, and let me see if she doesn't really like to be picked up, but we'll see. All right. This one is Hush. You can tell how happy she is to be here.
She's like, why?
She's charging me for this in hours of sleep. So I will sleep 3 hours tonight. Yeah.
He's so cute.
I know.
So we have a question here from Evelyn. Have you considered writing about or saving Jane Austen?
She was actually one of the ones our publisher really wanted us to write about.
We did consider it, but what we try to do is we don't just pick a famous Jane that would be funny to write about, although that would be easier.
Yeah.
But we try to pick someone that we feel has not gotten a fair shake in history. So somebody who has had kind of a tragedy or has been kind of screwed over by the patriarchy, and we try to give them the happy ending that they deserved. And we just really didn't feel that Jane Austen didn't get her happy ending. The only sort of tragedy that we felt would need to be righted is that she didn't end up with a guy, and we couldn't make that something we wanted to fix. So it would have been really fun, though. We love Jane Austen.
Yeah, me too.
Sarah asks, what did you learn on your trip to Deadwood?
The road used to be paved with poop.
That's true.
I'm sure we picked up some other things too, but that one really
Stuck
in my mind. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
People smelled the town before they saw it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of gambling.
In current, well, yeah, in Old Deadwood too, I guess. In all the Deadwoods, they've always been gambling.
They had a lot of weird saloon names that didn't make sense. So Cynthia, tell us about them.
Oh no. Some of those are made up, but some on that page, yeah, some of those are made up. But yeah, they had a lot of saloons.
I forget what we made up and what's actual.
I'm like, there was the Tully Saloon, who was owned by a man named Smith. That's the only thing I can remember from that page right now.
The Lone Star Saloon, even though we weren't in Texas.
We got to see where Jane and Wild Bill were buried, and they're buried next to each other. And Jane has a bottle of, what was it? Jack Daniels, a bottle of Jack Daniels on top of her grave.
Yeah, the cemetery was very beautiful.
It was, even with the Jack Daniels.
Yeah, it was really the hike up there though. Like I was exhausted by the time we got up to I was ready to just go to sleep.
The town was really nice though. I mean, we talk about it smelling like poop back in the day. It does not smell like poop now. Let's just clarify.
Yes, it's really a great town.
And it has a fun energy, and the people were really friendly. Like, we ended up talking with people who live there, and we stayed in the jail. Like,
that was exciting.
Converted jail. The walls were so thick that it just was so quiet inside. It was a little creepy. I was pretty convinced that we weren't alone ever.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely like just stared kind of out into the other room, or into like the center of our, was there even a door there? I don't remember if there was a door, but we just kind of stared. Oh no, we didn't close the door because of the heater, because it was cold. But yeah, we just stared, waiting for like some kind of ghost to come get us. It was creepy.
So Shayna asks, do you guys particularly like horses? Or what is the inspiration for Ethios?
How did we come up with changing Cynthia's? That was Cynthia's baby, was just imagining two characters who were changing and into animals, and so we kind of picked, I don't know how we picked a horse for Gifford, but how did we pick a horse?
I think that was always a horse.
Yeah, I think that was part of my, like, I just had that image of like the girl riding the horse and then the man with the, at that time, mouse in his pocket. And so I think he was always a horse. Yeah, I don't know we ever.
He's very horse-like. He had a, you know, wide, long face.
Well, speaking of animals, whose idea was George the talking dog?
George's actually was a real poodle. He was actually Frank's dog at that time. So
it just made sense that he talked.
Yes.
Well, it made sense that Frank could hear him.
Yes.
George can't necessarily talk. But
yeah, he doesn't talk to everyone.
Yeah.
Frank can hear his thoughts.
Of course. You know, as you do.
Yeah.
So for this book, do you guys switch who takes the point of view of the Jane? There's been 3 Janes. So do you guys rotate the Janes? Who wrote the Jane this time?
Me this time. Yep. And Brodi wrote Jane Eyre. So yes, we have switched it for my plain Jane. And Helen.
And Helen, yes. Yes, dear. And Helen.
Helen's my favorite.
So yes, I wrote Calamity this time, and
I wrote Frank Butler.
So dreamy. And I wrote Annie, and I love
so
her.
Adorable.
Sarah wants to know, if you could describe each character in 3 words, what would you use? I suppose you could each describe your own characters?
Yes, I will describe Annie. The very best.
Oh, that was so awesome. I can't top that.
I will describe Frank. The second best.
Calamity, trying her best.
Yes. I would say those are both very accurate.
It's probably the best answers I've ever heard for those questions. Usually you get someone trying to be extremely profound, but this, like, you really get the feel for the characters just with those short phrases right away. I don't know if there's anybody in our chat group who has not finished the book, but if you're even partway through, those descriptions make a lot of sense. So we had mentioned when we were first talking about this event that you guys do a dramatic reading. Is that something you wanted to do at the end, in the middle? Do you guys close out the event with that? So we should save that for later? Or do you do that in the middle?
We can do it at any time. We are always prepared to read dramatically.
I mean, we could
do.
Cynthia, your side.
Sure. Yeah, we can.
Okay. Okay. This is gonna be. Oh, I gotta put the hat on because.
Oh, I gotta put the hat on too. For this dramatic reenactment, Brodi will be reading the narrator. And I will read Jane since I wrote her, and it's not going to fit on top of my earphones.
I will bring the horse back for ambiance.
Okay. I will be reading Annie.
Okay.
You're the best.
Should we set it up a little? Let's see.
Yeah.
So what has happened so far? This is about the first third of the book. About the Annie has. How do we set this up? Okay, so
Annie has made herself part of the show.
Yes, Wild Bill's Wild West is also secretly hunting Garu, and Annie saw them leave and followed them to an old candle factory where they were hunting for this very specific Garu called the Alpha, and did not find him. But she was sort of in the background the whole time, and she's allergic to dogs, so anytime there was really a Garu on the screen, we heard this little achoo from Annie in the background, and nobody knew that it was her.
Nobody asked questions either.
During that little excursion, which I like to call the Scooby-Doo scene, like when they're in the factory, Jane was bitten by a Garu, which means that she's infected. So she kind of has that, and she's not feeling super well. So, and after that, Annie suggested that she should be part of their gang, and kind of blackmailed her way into becoming part of their gang. And Wild Bill, who runs the whole thing, said that she could. So is that about what's happened to this point?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it.
So Annie is very persistent and wants to know everything about the gang.
And this is Jane's chapter, so when, like, it's from her point of view. So,
all right, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay. She woke up. Someone was knocking. This is Jane woke up. I'm just going to tell you. Jane woke up. Someone was knocking on the hotel room door. This happened a lot in Jane's life, being awakened by knocking, and dang, but she never was the one who got to knock. Jane groaned and flopped over onto her stomach.
Go away!
She blustered in the direction of the door.
I'm asleep!
A pause and then more knocking.
Consarn it, go away!
No such doing. If anything, the knocking got more insistent. She threw off the sheets and lurched to her feet. Happily, she discovered that she was already wearing boots and a shirt. She wasn't sure where her pants had gone. She grabbed the wool blanket from the bed and tried to wrap it around her waist. Then she stumbled over to the door and heaved it open.
Oh, good, you're up.
It was the crack shot girl from the shooting competition, the one Frank was mooning over like a lovesick puppy. What was her name again?
I'm Annie, the newest member of your show.
The girl said.
Good morning.
I don't see what's so gall-darn good about it.
Jane had a taste in her mouth like she had supper with a coyote. Had she gotten herself sloshed last night? She didn't think she had. She swallowed queasily.
What can I do for you, Miss?
Mosey,
provided Annie. She crossed over to the window and opened the curtains, flooding the room with light.
And I've been wondering what to call you. Is your Christian name Calamity or Jane?
My Christian name?
Your first name. Like, mine is Annie. Well, actually, my Christian name is Phoebe, but no one but my mother uses it. My sister said Phoebe was too fancy, and I'd walk around putting on airs with a name like that. So it's just been Annie.
I don't go by my real name neither.
Jane murmured.
Oh, I see.
Annie said.
Why'd you change it?
Jane rubbed at her eyes.
I guess there came a time when I had to leave the other name behind.
An image from that fateful day swam into her head. Bill sitting down next to her on the street in Fort Laramie, asking her name.
I needed a fresh start, was all.
Annie looked puzzled. Sorry.
And you chose to start fresh as Calamity Jane?
Nah, just Jane at first. I got the Calamity later when I saved Captain Egan from certain death in a skirmish with the Sioux a few years back. I saw him fall from his horse, struck by an arrow, so I turned around real fast and rode back to him, and then lifted him up on my horse and rode him to safety. And because of that, he said, later, after he'd recovered some, of course, I dubbed thee Calamity Jane, the heroine of the plains.
Reader, we should mention that this entire account with Captain Egan was a fabrication, a stretcher, Jane would have called it. And it didn't even really make sense. But that was the official explanation she'd come up with a few years back. And it was a pretty good whopper, so we'll let it slide for now.
That's an amazing story.
Annie said. Jane nodded.
You can call me Jane. Frank calls me Calam sometimes, but I don't like it much.
All right, Jane. I bet you're wondering why I'm here so bright and early.
Jane had been wondering.
Mr. Hickok says that I'm to room with you from now on.
Annie continued.
So here I am, all ready to move in.
She crossed quickly back to the door where she dragged in a trunk and a gun case that Jane hadn't noticed before, then glanced a bit worriedly around the room.
May I have the bottom 3 drawers in the dresser and some space in the armoire to hang my dresses? I have quite a bit to unpack. I like to be prepared. You see, better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. That's my motto.
Sure, go right ahead.
Jane did not have much in the way of extra clothing or lady things. It all fit in a jumble in the top drawer, in fact.
Wonderful.
Annie slung her trunk onto the extra bed and unpacked it, hanging and smoothing her dresses, folding each item carefully into thirds and stacking them upright so she could see all the items in the drawers.
Why are you putting your clothes like that?
Jane asked.
Because it sparks joy.
Annie said.
Huh?
Said Jane. Annie scooped a pair of pants off the floor and handed them to Jane like an offering.
Now, Jane, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like you to show me the ropes.
Jane kicked off her boots and struggled to fit her legs into her breeches. There didn't seem to be enough leg holes for the number of legs she had.
Ropes? I don't often use ropes, unless I need to tie something up.
I was being metaphorical.
Annie grabbed Jane's pants from her, whipped them in the air once to straighten them out, and then returned them.
You volunteered to train me, remember? I thought we could start this morning.
Jane considered the request as she shimmied into the pants.
Sure I could, but maybe later. I think I need to get me some hair of the dog.
Annie rubbed her nose.
That sounds unsanitary. If you're feeling unwell, some fresh air might help. My father always said that the best way for a person to feel better is to move out outdoors. Get the blood flowing.
She nodded as if she were agreeing with herself.
But perhaps if you're too sickly to go out, we could stay here and talk.
Jane stared at her aghast.
Talk? You want to talk more?
If we're going to be working together and living together, we should get to know each other.
We should get a move on.
Jane put her boots back on and tied her massive unruly dark hair into a ponytail. Then she crammed her hat down onto her head, grabbed her gun and whip from the nightstand, and headed a bit unsteadily for the door.
A move on to where?
Annie asked eagerly. Jane shrugged.
I guess I'll show you the ropes. This here's Black Nell, Bill's horse.
She said a few minutes later, pointing to the biggest stall where Nell stood, knocking her front hooves impatiently. Annie stepped forward with her hand out, wanting to touch.
She's a beauty.
Jane pulled her back before the girl could get it fit.
She's wild, that one, what you might call undomesticated. Won't stand for nobody but me or Bill.
Annie reached out anyway, and Black Nell pushed her big velvety nose into the girl's small hand. Within a few minutes, the horse was actually nuzzling her. It was unsettling. Jane ushered Annie down to a stall where 2 horses were standing, tails flicking.
This here is Charlie's horse, and we call him Charlie's horse. And that there is Ed, Frank's horse. Frank likes to call him Mr. Ed. He's a clever one.
Ed stuck out his face and gave a cordial nod, almost like a bow.
Oh, but aren't you such handsome fellows?
Cooed Annie to the horses.
How do you do?
The horses can't talk.
Jane said gruffly and moved them down a stall again.
This here's Bullseye. She's mine. She's gotten me out of many a scrape riding for the Pony Express.
Annie turned to stare at her with wide eyes.
You've actually been a writer for the Pony Express? For real?
God's own truth.
Jane nodded.
I were one of the best, if I don't mind saying so. I used to ride some of the most dangerous stretches of road in this here America, and I never had any trouble. Any road agents thereabouts knew I never missed a shot, and they didn't bother me.
Again, reader, this was not exactly the truth, or even a little bit the truth.
You never miss a shot?
Annie smiled.
You only use the whip in the show.
Charlie says the show needs variety, and I'm the best with the bullwhip, but I'm an ace with a gun as well.
Jane bragged.
I never miss unless I mean to.
I don't either,
said the girl.
Well, good.
Jane scratched the back of her neck and then changed the subject by showing Annie the rest of the animals. Bill's donkey, Silver.
He's a lazy ass. Puffs up his belly if you try to saddle him. He'll stop moving every 5 minutes if you let him. Won't go but the slowest of walks. Sleeps most all the time. I don't know why Bill won't just sell him.
He's cute,
said Annie. They petted him for a few minutes in uncomfortable silence. Then Annie fished a small book out of her pocket.
I also wonder if you could tell me about the Garrow.
Jane straightened in alarm.
Why would I know anything about Garu?
Annie cocked her head to one side.
Because you're a Garou.
No, I'm not!
Burst out Jane. Annie blinked at her.
I know you're all Garou hunters. You and Mr. Butler and Mr. Hickok and Mr. Utter.
Jane folded her arms over her chest.
And how do you know that exactly?
Annie folded her arms too.
I just do.
Jane's heart was beating fast. Yesterday, Annie had said she had proof that their posse was still hunting Garou. She'd acted like she herself was eager to hunt them. And now, as Jane happened to look at her hand, which was up by her face on account of her folding her arms, a tuft of fur sprouted from the right knuckle. She was changing. It wouldn't be long now, and this could be her entire body, a hairy beast. Jane thrust her hand deep into her pocket. Said Annie.
Oh, dear.
Bless you.
Jane said. And then, yes, we know she should have done this a bit sooner. She finally put 2 and 2 together.
Hey, it was you!
Me?
Annie looked at her with those round blue eyes.
At the factory, you were there. You were the one who kept sneezing.
Oh, that.
Annie pressed a handkerchief to her upturned nose.
Yes, that was me.
You almost got me killed.
Jane exclaimed so loudly, Silver tossed his head and brayed.
Well, yes, that's true, but I also saved your life multiple times.
Explained Annie.
It was I who shot Mr. Bad outside the office, not Mr. Butler.
Which is why Mr. Bad didn't die.
Jane figured out slowly.
Because you didn't shoot him with the silver bullet.
I didn't know you needed a silver bullet to kill Garou.
Annie confessed. Jane snorted.
Everyone knows that.
Annie's chin lifted.
Even if I had known, I don't possess any silver bullets. And even if I did possess one, I wouldn't have known to bring one along with me when I followed you that night.
Aha! So you admit you followed us that night.
Yes, I already said that.
And you almost got me killed. I changed my vote.
Said Jane hotly.
You're not in the posse.
Annie's mouth fell open.
You can't do that. I saved your life.
Did not. I would have been fine if you hadn't shot that Garou.
Jane retorted. She would have been more than fine, she thought. She would have gotten clear of the wolf some other way and never been bit. To Jane's way of seeing it, this was all Annie's fault.
I was also the one who turned on the machine when that second Garou was trying to get you, providing a distraction at the critical moment.
Annie's dander was clearly up. Her face was turning pink.
So I saved your life twice, really?
You did not.
Screamed Jane, then.
Ah! Wait, what do you mean, that second Garou?
Oh, you know.
Annie tilted her head to one side. Jane did not know.
What are you talking about?
Annie stifled a smile, obviously pleased that she had some new knowledge to impart.
There were 2 Garou that night in the factory, Mr. Bad and the other one who came from downstairs and attacked you.
Jane stared at Annie. Then she grabbed the girl by the hand and started pulling her toward the exit.
I changed my vote again. You can be in the posse.
Why, thank you.
Said Annie.
Although I'm still only counting your original vote. You can't change your vote. Where are we going?
They reached the barn door and Jane flung it open, revealing Frank standing there. He was wearing his dandiest suit, Jane noticed. He was also holding a bouquet of yellow flowers, and he put that fine, smelly stuff in his hair. His gaze passed right over Jane and landed on Annie. He smiled, and Jane caught a whiff of mint. Good morning, Miss Mosey, he said. Fine day, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Agreed Annie in a softer voice than she'd been using before.
How are you this morning, Mr. Butler?
Very well, thank you. Would you like to...
Stop! There's no time for that.
Yelled Jane.
We gotta go see Charlie.
I told you Charlie's fine, Frank said as Jane passed him. She passed him, yeah. Mm-hmm. Still with Annie by the hand. I saw him last night. He's banged up, of course, but he was in good spirits.
We gotta tell him there were 2 Garou that night at the factory.
Jane kept walking, towing Annie behind her. Frank jogged to keep up. 2 Garou? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
There were 2.
It was the second wolf who'd bitten her, Jane realized.
One of them got away.
The end.
So at this point, I will remind our viewers that Gibson's Bookstore does have the book available for purchase, and that we do have signed book plates to include with any of the purchases from the bookstore. So the the three of you, when you are, yes, applause, by the way, for that very fantastic dramatic reading.
We don't really hold a candle to Sophie.
Yes.
No.
So the three of you have obviously mixed there's several cameos in there, and there's several Easter eggs for you, for viewers or readers to find. So when you guys are doing research on these characters, how do you decide how closely to stick to the stories?
Whatever suits us.
Yes, that's true.
Mhm.
It is very true.
We do a ton of research on the characters, and then we change whatever facts we need to.
And we cherry pick, like we pick all the best stuff, the funniest. We look for funny, which there isn't a ton of in some of these, but like, and it just sort of, we pick the best little bits.
So how, I suppose the settings, there's a lot of anachronisms just in those cameos right there, which must be tremendous fun. How do you choose which of the setting to keep? In keeping true to the setting, do you get therefore to be a little bit silly with the characters?
Yeah, I think we take the settings pretty seriously. Like we do a lot of research on the settings as much as we do on the characters, and we try to go to, like, we went to Deadwood, we went to London and Bradgate Park and parts of England. And Dudley Castle, yes. When we were researching My Lady Jane. So we try to put a lot of, I think we get a lot of satisfaction in putting a lot of real tidbits in with the stuff that we make up, and the jokes and the anachronisms and the pop culture references. So there's a lot for history nerds in the books too, I think.
Hello, Pidgey.
My ferret.
So how did the three of you guys meet?
We met on mine and Brodi's first tour for our debut books, and it was Cynthia's second tour, and she was the veteran. And looking back now, I don't know how that must have felt, but like would have been weird to like feel like the vet at book 2.
Yeah. I was an expert by then.
Yes.
Clearly.
Yes, Brodi and I definitely thought so. Yeah, and we just became really good friends, and then we started looking for more ways to hang out. If we could deduct it from our taxes too, all the better. Yeah.
Yeah, Cynthia, tell how we. No, never mind.
You can't
What?
It's hanging there. What was that?
Which story is it?
How we decided to write the book together.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'd always wanted to write about Jane Grey, but I felt like it would be so depressing because in history, Jane Grey gets beheaded. And I thought that would be a really depressing young adult novel. And then I thought, well, if I'm going to change the story, then might as well really change it, and started thinking about that and thought maybe it could be funny. And I was really in the mood for funny because I just written my book, The Last Time We Say Goodbye, which was a little bit somber. So I had this idea that I would write this funny book, but I was a little, I wasn't super confident in my ability to do that. And I thought about who do I know who's really funny and who can really write funny things and who I like and maybe could write a book with. And that answer was obviously Brodi. So the next time that I was up in Utah with her, I really poorly pitched the story of Jane Grey. And
so we were having lunch, and she goes, "Hey, I was thinking of writing this book, and I was wondering if you wanted to write it with me. And it's about Jane Grey, who was beheaded, queen for 9 days, and then beheaded. But we can make it funny." I was like, I just like shoved lettuce in my mouth, and I was like, I don't have an answer.
That is clearly never going to work. And then it was a few months later that we talked about it again, and this time we were in Virginia. We were hanging out with Jodi, and And by that time, I had done some more thinking about it and thought we should have like a fantastical element so that we could really veer away from history. And then I just on the totally impromptu was like, hey, let's get the best fantasy writer that I know. And also awesome person I'd like to hang out with more. And so I asked Jodi.
Well, she asked me after saying that they were writing a book together. And in hindsight, Brodi was very quiet during all of that, which is unusual. And I was just incredibly jealous that they were writing a book together. And I was like, that's so great for you. I'm so happy that you guys get to spend time together like that. And then she asked me, and I said yes, without even asking what the book was about, because I was just so pleased to be included. And it wasn't until an hour later, after I'd like already told my agent and everything, that I was like, hey, what is this book about? And then I got the pitch.
Funny beheadings.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit better than that at that point. But yeah, it was still, I still had questions. So
the real turning point was when we were in California together, because we just like to hang out together, and we were going to take Jodi to Disneyland because she's never been to Disneyland. And we all woke up that morning and we were like, should we go to Disneyland or should we go to the library at Pepperdine and start writing this book? And so we chose Pepperdine, and Jodi has still not been to Disneyland to this day.
Yeah, it's really sad.
Going to be my next question. Did you get to go to Disneyland?
No, and it's so sad because on this tour that we were going to take for My Calamity Jane, we had scheduled to stop right in California. We were going to take Jodi to Disneyland, and then our tour got canceled. So poor Jodi has still not made it.
She at least been given a churro.
No.
I've had, well, not from Disneyland. I mean, I've had churros before.
So what made you decide, I suppose, Cynthia, I guess this question would be towards you. How did you choose to write My Lady Jane geared toward teens?
Well, that was just what we did, like all three of us were young adult writers. So I think that was never a question who the audience would be. But we all seen. Yeah. Yeah, she was 16 years old. So that also was part of it.
Okay, so Shayna asks, what are each of your favorite young adult books?
I don't really do favorite books.
Been excited by lately that you want?
That's the one I like to answer. Yeah, I don't do favorite books of all time because then I start feeling really guilty. But the book that I'm trying to get everybody and their dog to read right now is Agnes at the End of the World by Kelly McWilliams. And it's just beautiful, and it came out just this last Tuesday.
Just this week, right? With the is that
yes,
it?
Yes,
yes, it's working.
What's the elevator pitch for that book?
Cults, pandemics, and sister love.
That's a pretty good elevator pitch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't really prepared. Otherwise, I would have said the stakes and stuff. So, but everybody likes cults and pandemics and sister love.
Well, we all love pandemics right now.
Pandemics especially, yes.
What about you, Brodi? Do you have a book that you are eager to make everybody read?
I can't answer that question. There's so many. Yeah, no. I like them all.
I'll answer for Brodi because you met her and you like her. Our friend Francina Simone has a book coming out called Smash It, and it comes out in September, and it's very good.
Oh, I would say Christian Heidecker's book, Scary Stories for Young Foxes. Scary Stories for Young Foxes. Mm-hmm. It just won, was it a Newbery? It just won a Newbery, and it's an incredible book. So Scary Stories for Young Foxes, yes.
Is there an elevator pitch for that one?
Yeah, it's about scary stories for young foxes.
Wow.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Is it a specific fox that is telling the stories or being told the stories too?
You'll have to see.
And, yeah.
Christian is incredibly talented. So
I think the one that I will promote this time is Veronica Rossi's book Rebel Spy, which is coming out later this month. And that's just one of those just great historical young adult novels where the character is just really, I don't want to say strong because that has its, I mean, she is, but like really smart and determined to survive and also principled. And I just really love that book. So that's the one I'll pitch for now. And during the Revolutionary War. So it's based on this actual spy that we don't know very much about in history during the Revolutionary War. So it's a good one. And it has a really good romance.
Good romance is always good. So you guys, I've noticed that most of the books that you guys seem to enjoy reading are set in the past. If you guys wrote a contemporary Janie book, is that something that you could do? I mean, I don't want to ask you who you would write about because you can't just pull that out of the air, but is it possible to write a Janie book set contemporary?
I think it would be possible, but the elements that we look for when we're writing books we look for women in history who have been overlooked because of their gender. And I think that would be a little bit, I'm not saying that gender discrimination does not exist right now, but it'd be a little bit harder to find. Do you guys agree?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it would be harder to give somebody, especially somebody who might still be living, a happy ending with, them still being alive.
That's true. I mean, you don't know how their story is going to end yet. So, and it's easier to find overlooked women. Well, not easier. There are women far more overlooked in the past. How far back, if we flip this, how far back would you go?
We have had talks about ancient Greek women before, so like,
yeah,
we haven't got anything on the table like that, but yet.
But it has been in discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
true.
Pidge.
Pidge likes the Greeks.
Yeah.
She hears they make great horses.
Well, you seem to have horses in your books an awful lot. You could go back to Pegasus.
Yes, we could.
I'll look for my thank you note in your
Dedication.
So is there any upcoming projects that you guys want to talk about? I know that you guys write as a trio, but what's next for you guys?
Cynthia has something out this fall. Go, Cynthia.
I do. I have something out in
winter?
May. Yeah.
I'm so confused by time.
For a while. We're gonna have 2 right in a row. So the Hawaii book is, I'm struggling to remember the title of it. It's With You All the Way. There we go. that comes out in May, and it's a contemporary novel about a girl who's sort of on this vacation / business trip that her mother has to take every year and they go to a different place every year, but this year it is in Hawaii, and her family is having a little bit of a struggle this year, and she learns some disturbing things about what's going on in her family while she's on vacation. It has to do with that. So it's a book about sisters and family and deciding to have sex for the first time, because everywhere that this character turns, people are making that decision, and she just doesn't know really what to think of that. So that's what that book is about.
It's a really excellent book.
Yes, Jodi has heard a lot of that book out loud, like as I was editing it. And then right after that, we have the next Mary book that's coming out.
It's called My Contrary Mary, and it's about Mary, Queen of Scots, and it's set in the Ethian world again.
So that was really fun.
There is a character who turns into a horse. You're welcome.
You guys have a thing with horses, so
we do. We like horses.
Maybe you need to write a My Lady Horse. So let's see if there are any more audience questions before we wrap up if you guys want to toss those into the chat bar or into our Q&A box, that would be, this is the time to do so. So let's see, Mary Queen of Scots and Jane and Pidgey, would you write a book about a bird, Brodi?
Oh, we did. I mean, Edward is a bird.
Well,
but no, birds are rather boring.
Aww.
No, I don't mean that. I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Kisses. Okay.
All right.
Her beak is powerful enough to bite your lip off.
I was just actually thinking that you were very brave to be bringing your lip so close.
We trust each other.
Now, what kind of bird is Pidgey?
She's an eclectus parrot. Eclectus? Eclectus. For some reason, that word doesn't make sense right now. But an eclectus parrot, yep. And she's going to live for another 40 years. So it was quite the investment. And
it's like a kid that never moves out.
Yeah. And so we're going to have to, like, you know, pass her down generation to generation.
Is she going to live in your basement later? Like,
yeah.
Playing video games all day.
Does she mimic sounds?
She used to, but now she just does a little, and then every time you leave the room, she squawks. Like if I put her down and left the room right now, she'd squawk so loud you know, burst your ears. Oh, great. It's really annoying. It's really annoying pet. I do not recommend them. I love her, but I do not recommend them. Because right now, I mean, we're having this great moment, but her nails are digging into me so hard. And she doesn't mean to. It's just the way, you know, her nails are and everything. So it's like, you know, I've got like, it's literally almost drawing blood. So yeah, buy an eclectus parrot. They're only $1,000.
For 40 years of your life.
And yeah, 30, 40 years of your life.
Yep.
So let's see.
Jodi has a book coming out. Or a book
In 2022, and it's not announced yet publicly.
Oh.
So, I mean, it's fine. I'll tell people that it's coming. I just can't talk about what it is. But
Okay.
I'm very excited by it.
Can you tell us the genre?
Fantasy.
Can you tell us the age range?
Young adult.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sorry.
And Brodi writes a column for the Salt Lake Tribune, which is really, really funny. So
Yeah, I read it. I have a column on Sundays where I just tell stories about my life. And then I get trolled by the comments. It's great.
It is the internet.
Yeah.
The internet. So how do you guys decide how much fantasy to throw in these books? Because, I mean, obviously, well, as far as we know, werewolves aren't real.
As far as we know. I think usually we pick one fantastical element and make it important to the world building and important to the plot. And that is our fantasy element. Anything else is just, you know, if there's anything else, it's just frosting.
We do that just so that nobody will ever like confuse our books with like actual historical fiction.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's always this element of something really different, you know, about that story.
That is just accepted in the world too. You know, everybody in the Jane and Lady Jane knows about the Athians and that people can turn into animals. Everybody in Plain Jane knows about the Society for the Relocation of Wayward Spirits. It's not a mouthful to say. And everybody in Calamity Jane knows about the werewolves.
I think I read an interesting Twitter thread about a week ago that said that this was the definition of magical realism.
I don't know that I would say that. Magic realism is very mostly claimed by people of like Latinx origin, and that's not us.
That's true.
But magic realism seems to have moving borders, and ours have very firm borders.
So what do you mean by moving borders?
You never know necessarily if something is, like anything could still happen. Like in ours, like the magic is the way that it is. And in magical realism, it seems to be a little bit more fluid. The magic can do kind of anything. You don't know.
So the definition that I had read was that in that genre, it wasn't called magic. It was an accepted part of the world. Instead of, so they weren't calling the Garu magical. They were just the Garu. So in that aspect, it is not, in this world, it is not magic. It is just a part of the natural world.
Yeah.
So, and that was what I had meant. But so in that part, is there extra magic, though they wouldn't call it magic, that you could identify in any of these books? Would they be fantasy, or?
I think of them as being straight fantasy, like historical fantasy, but like, because when I think of magical realism, it's the realism part of it that sticks out to me. Like when I read magical realism, the world feels exactly real, except for these small things that kind of push those boundaries.
Right.
Whereas we're just unapologetically not real, right? Like we don't mind, citing the Ghostbusters and having ghosts come in and out. And so I think we're very definitely in the fantasy genre, just playing around. We're not trying to make it super realistic.
Well, I loved your little Easter egg that you had just in the dramatic reading with the Marie Kondo sparking joy, and it's, you guys obviously don't take yourself too seriously, which makes your books a ton of fun to read. So obviously that's a part of your goal. So if you had one takeaway for the readers to take us out on this event, one takeaway that you hope that the readers take from your book, what would you hope it would be?
That is
I
really
hope they laugh.
Yeah.
And learn a little bit of history.
Okay. All right, and possibly some sharpshooting tricks.
And how to kill Garu.
I know.
No. Garu, our friends, not foes.
Okay, so I will take us out then with a last reminder that Gibson's Bookstore Author Events Program is sustained by book sales. You can get My Calamity Jane from Gibson's Bookstore, as well as My Plain Jane and My Lady Jane with signed book plates included with all purchases. That is it for us this evening. Thank you for joining us, everybody, tonight. Thank you, Brodi. Thank you, Cynthia. Thank you, Jodi. Thank you, everybody joining us at home. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you.